All right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to call the meeting to order at 5 p.m. Welcome back to the new year. Before we get started with today's meeting, I want to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is Treaty 2 land, traditional territory of Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Assiniboine, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Red River Métis. We affirm our commitment to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities, including the national government of the Red River Métis, in a spirit of collaboration and reconciliation. First motion, moved by Deputy Mayor Loughlin and seconded by Councillor Ray, be it resolved that the council meeting agenda for today be amended to have one addition, and that's to add some outstanding water accounts added to taxes. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. And moved by Councillor Daly, seconded by Councillor Sticalo, be it resolved that we accept the regular council meeting agenda as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Sobring, that council waives the reading and accepts and approves the minutes from the regular council meeting of December the 8th. Are there any questions or comments regarding anything in the minutes of that meeting? Call for the question then. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll move right into the consent agenda. Got a couple of action items. There's several outstanding receivables that are going to be added to taxes. Roll 0111000, $619.72 for yard cleanup and weed control. Roll 0154700, $794.34 for the same reason. And roll 0104100, $657.04 also for the same rationale. We have some outstanding water accounts added to taxes. Roll number 0006900, $23,092.59. The current property owner did not pay the water bill. Roll number 0101900 for $264.89. The previous tenant did not pay the final water bill. And roll number 0371000, $599.67. The previous owner did not pay the final water bill. And those are recommended by the Director of Finance and the Utility Clerk. The number of filing items for today's meeting, that from the Manitoba government, the local journalism report, from Environment and Climate Change, the new board chairs for Manitoba Hydro and Efficiency Manitoba, and from Justice regarding Business Security Rebate Program. The 2025 annual report from the Auditor General, the Manitoba Municipal Northern Relations Grow Funding application for 2025-26, Mountain View School Division News Digest from December 2025, the Parkland Chamber of Commerce Chamber Insider from December of 2025, and the Community Futures Parkland newsletter of December. Moved by Councillor Daly, seconded by Councillor Bellemare, that all items listed in red under item 5, the consent agenda, be approved and form part of these minutes. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Moved by Councillor Sobring and seconded by Councillor Ray, that we accept as information the corporate report for today's meeting from the city manager. Charlotte, is there anything you wanted to draw our attention to in your report?
Nothing that I wanted to draw attention to specifically, but I just wanted to say that we're very proud to have our staff recognized at our staff appreciation and Christmas party, especially our two retirees, Grant Bombing and Gail Brunin.
That's it. Any questions from any members of council for the city manager? Seeing none, call for the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? That is carried. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Sobring, that we accept the corporate report from the deputy city manager for December. Lisa, is there something you want to bring to our attention?
Thank you, Mayor Boziak. I would just like to point out that we still have free radon test kits available at City Hall. So if any residents have not tested their homes for radon yet this winter, to please stop by and pick up a radon test kit. Also, after many months of preparation, our community safety and well-being plan is ready for presentation to council this evening, and I'll say a few words on that when we get to that item a little bit farther along in the agenda. Thank you.
Questions for Lisa from anyone on council? No. Call for the question then. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moved by Councillor Bellemare, seconded by Deputy Mayor Loughlin. Be resolved that the finance accounts, having been examined by council, be hereby authorized and approved as follows. We had 114 checks in the recent check run for a total of $5,006,753.76. There were no voided checks in the current or past range. We had 7 EFT payments and 5 additional electronic fund payments totaling $206,112.86, and the EFTs were $46,459.17. Any questions or comments regarding the financial report? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried. Moved by Councillor Bellemare, seconded by Councillor Daly, that council accepts as information the unaudited financial statements for the period ending November 30th, including the general fund balance sheet and income statement and the utility fund balance sheet and income statement. Any questions regarding those two reports? All in favor of accepting? Anyone opposed? Carried. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Sobring, that council accepts as information the reserve report for the period ending November the 2025. Any questions regarding the reserve report? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none. Carried. Moved by Councillor Stakilo, seconded by Councillor Ray. Be resolved that council accepts as information the budget variance analysis for the period ending November 2025. Any questions regarding this financial report? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moved by Councillor Bellemare, seconded by Councillor Sobring, that council accepts the engineering report for today's meeting from the Director of Public Works and Operations. Any questions or comments regarding this report? Call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion is carried. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Sobring. Be it resolved that council accepts as information the minutes and reports from the following committees: Fort Dauphin Museum, their regular board meeting and their manager's report, the board meeting from November and the manager's report for December. From Rec Services, their regular board meeting on December the 10th, and from the Vet Services District, their regular board meeting of December the 19th. Any questions or comments regarding these reports? Seeing none, call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moved by Councillor Daly, seconded by Councillor Ray. Be it resolved that council accepts information, correspondence from John Urama, President of the Parkland Chamber of Commerce, requesting financial support in the amount of $10,000 from the city to support core programs and services. Further be resolved that council forwards the funding request from the chamber to the city's 2026 budget deliberations. Any questions or comments regarding this request? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried. Moved by Councillor Bellemare, seconded by Councillor Daly. Be it resolved that council accepts information, correspondence from Denise Penrose, the dog director at the Parkland Humane Society, requesting financial support in the amount of $5,000 from the city for the period of September 1st to August 31st, 2026. Are those dates correct? They'll be,
Yeah, they straddle. It's like a.
but from September 1st, 2025 to August 31st.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's,
so,
it's mostly in 26. It should just-
okay. And for the resolve that, yeah, for the resolve that council forwards the funding request again to our budget deliberation for consideration. Questions or comments regarding this request? Call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moved by Councillor Sobring, seconded by Councillor Ray. Further be resolved that pursuant to bylaw 03-2012, being a bylaw of the City of Dauphin, to establish a tax sale contractor position, council appoints Tax Service Inc. to contract tax sales for the city of Dauphin. Further be resolved that council appoints Donna Zinke, the general manager of Tax Service Inc., as tax sale contractor for the city for the calendar year of 2026. All those in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion is carried. Moved by Councillor Bellemare, seconded by Deputy Mayor Loughlin. Whereas Section 365, Bracket 2 of the Municipal Act states that council may in any year designate the immediate preceding year or an earlier year as the year for which properties, the taxes in respect of which are in arrears for the year, must be offered for sale by auction to recover the tax arrear and costs. Be it resolved that council designates 2024 as a tax sale year for the city of Dauphin, which will recover 2023 and prior years' arrears and costs. Questions or comments? All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion is carried. Moved by Councillor Sobering, seconded by Councillor Daly. Whereas council designated 2024 as a tax sale year, and whereas properties where taxes are unpaid for the year 2023 may be eligible for tax sale, be it resolved, tax sale for the 2024 tax year be held on October the 28th, 2026 at 11 a.m. Questions or comments? All in favor? And carried. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Stakilo. Whereas Section 372 of the Municipal Act states that a municipality may set any terms or conditions for the sale of a property to be sold for taxes and may set a reserve bid in the amount of the tax arrears and costs in respect to the property, be it resolved that for the designated 2024 tax sale year, council sets the reserve bid for each property eligible for tax sale at an amount equivalent to the tax arrears and costs of that property. Questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, carried. Moved by Councillor Daly, seconded by Councillor Sobering. Whereas Section 35(1) of the Municipal Assessment Act states that council shall each year, by resolution, appoint a board of revision consisting of not fewer than 3 members, some or all of whom may be members of council. And whereas Section 35(2) of the Act states that council shall appoint a member of a board appointed under subsection 1 to serve as the presiding officer of the board. And whereas Section 35(4) of the Act states that council shall appoint a person to act as secretary of the board appointed under subsection 1, be it resolved that the 2027 Board of Revision shall consist of all council members of the city, a representative of the Parkland Chamber of Commerce, and a representative of the Dauphin Economic Development and Tourism Committee. Further be resolved that council appoints the mayor, or in their stead the deputy, to act as the chair, and further be resolved that council appoints the deputy city manager, or in their stead the city manager, to act as secretary of the board. All in favor? Opposed? Man, lots of stuff to just approve, huh?
So this is,
Process.
we have, the consultant online to do a presentation.
Okay,
First, then they read the resolution.
sure. Yeah, go ahead. You can invite them.
So for this next item, that we have a presentation from our consultant regarding our community safety and wellbeing plan, the Canadian Centre for Safer Communities. And I'm going to hand it over to our deputy city manager to do an introduction.
Thank you. So this evening, Council will be hearing a presentation on Dauphin's Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan, a significant milestone that reflects many months of collaboration, community engagement, and data-driven analysis. This plan was developed in partnership with the Canadian Centre for Safer Communities as part of Manitoba Justice's Community Safety and Wellbeing Planning pilot project. I want to sincerely thank both CCFSC and Manitoba Justice for their leadership, expertise, and investment in this work. Their support has allowed Dauphin to take a thoughtful, evidence-based approach to addressing complex issues that affect safety, belonging, and quality of life in our community. The Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan provides a long-term framework that moves us beyond reactionary responses and toward prevention, collaboration, and coordinated action. It identifies clear priorities, builds on our local strengths, and gives us a shared roadmap to improve outcomes related to housing, mental health and addiction, crime and safety, access to services, and sense of belonging. Most importantly, this plan reflects the voices and the lived experiences of our community, residents, service providers, frontline workers, and partners, and positions Dauphin to work smarter together for meaningful and lasting impact. And with that, I'll turn it over to our partners from the Canadian Centre for Safer Communities to walk Council through the plan and its key findings. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Let me just share my screen. Right. Thank you again, Lisa, for those kind words. I think you really kind of highlighted everything we're going to share today, but we'll just take our time to go through everything as briefly as we can. So I want to say thank you again to everyone for having us present for Dauphin's Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan today. My name is Oishi. I'm a project manager with the Canadian Centre for Safer Communities, or CCFSC, and I'm joined today with my colleague Katie, who's the Director of Operations and Services with CCFSC. We are the project leads for the Community Safety and Wellbeing, or CSWB, planning in Dauphin, and we're both located in southwestern Ontario. I am coming to you today from Hamilton, Ontario, specifically, which is the traditional territories of the Erie, Neutral, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississaugas people. So as Lisa already said, this project is funded through Manitoba Justice that involves the development of 12 CSWB plans in communities across Manitoba. Our organization was hired to support this work. CCFSC is a national not-for-profit organization that works with communities across Canada on CSWB planning, strategic planning, conducting research, knowledge exchange, among other work. So just a quick overview of our objectives today. We want to give a quick overview of the Dauphin CSWB plan, and then discuss next steps towards governance and implementation of the plan, as well as monitoring and evaluation, and then wrap up with some Q&A. So first, in terms of an overview of the plan, as I'm sure you've seen, Lisa has already shared the full plan document with you. We also had a chance to speak with Council back in December to go into the plan in more detail. So today's presentation will be just a very brief overview of the plan. So Dauphin's CSWB plan was developed through a process of working together with the multi-sectorial advisory committee, as well as connecting with the community, i.e. the people in Dauphin. We completed a community assessment that involved reviewing existing reports, distributing and analyzing a community safety and well-being survey for residents in Dauphin, including youth, and organizing several focus group engagements where we spoke to various community groups in Dauphin, including those who may be considered more vulnerable or harder to reach. And the goal of this was to really ensure that the priorities of the plan are informed by the community. And so from this process, we identified 5 priorities for the plan, which are housing and houselessness, mental health and addiction, crime and safety, access to services and supports, and sense of belonging. We also identified local strengths in Dauphin, what's working well in the community, including acknowledging the community pride and friendly environment, that Dauphin still has a small town feel, the natural beauty in the community, the cultural opportunities, and proximity to important amenities. Overall, the plan has 5 priorities, which I've noted, as well as 19 goals and 103 actions that are going to help achieve these goals. Actions are categorized into primary, secondary, and tertiary actions based on the population they focus on. And these actions, again, are developed based on the needs and recommendations identified by the community. Also worth noting that community safety wellbeing plans are typically longer plans. So there's a combination of both short-term and long-term actions. And so now I'll just go into the priorities and actions, goals, and provide a few examples of some actions that we have. So the first priority is housing and houselessness, and the goals for this priority include increasing access to housing, improving existing housing conditions, and expanding the different types of housing available in Dauphin. Next is mental health and addictions. The goals here are around improving understanding of mental health and addiction challenges, increasing supports, and strengthening collaboration between agencies to ensure that the supports given are timely and effective. Next is access to services and supports. And so the goals for this priority involve improving access to services in the community and expanding the availability of supports around employment, income, food, transportation, and healthcare. Next is crime and safety. The goals for this include increasing the perception of safety among community members in Dauphin and decreasing rates of crime. And then lastly, we have sense of belonging. The goals here involve increasing the sense of belonging in the community, increasing cultural awareness, supporting Indigenous cultural development and reconciliation, and reducing stigma towards vulnerable populations. As mentioned, there's 103 actions identified, so we obviously can't go through everything today, but these are just some examples of actions in the plan. So some actions are already happening in the community that align with the goals that we identified. That includes the continuing to current CEPTED efforts, the safety campaigns, as well as ongoing work to establish a centralized point for service navigation to help people access mental health and addiction supports more easily. Some actions are short-term and can be done fairly soon, such as developing an annual mental health and wellness fair, developing local asset maps to highlight available services in Dauphin, promoting the existing services in the community, as well as developing an Indigenous cultural space within public facilities or open spaces. We can also look forward to the future with longer-term actions that focus on things like increasing housing access, improving healthcare, and addressing ongoing issues around safety. I'll now hand it over to Katie, who will discuss what implementation of this plan can look like.
Thanks, Sawaishi. So we wanted to focus a little bit heavier on this part of the presentation today, since we did spend a lot of time talking about the process of developing the plan at the last meeting we had with you folks. So obviously top of mind for a lot of folks, and when we present to councils, and one of the main questions we get when doing this work is, how do we take this information, so those goals, those actions that Awaishi just mentioned, and actually implement them in a community? Because oftentimes, you know, we have these documents, but it's that next step of making them actionable that's key here. And so evidence from both literature and municipal case studies shows that having dedicated backbone support really strengthens CSWB work in communities. And so because of this, many of the communities we've worked with, and just in general, establish a CSWB coordinator to lead, manage, and sustain the plan and the implementation process. And so basically what this role does is it provides ongoing stewardship or backbone support of that CSWB plan implementation. So it combines strategic planning, bridge building across departments and partners, and administrative coordination all in one role. Because of course, implementing a CSWB plan is complex. It's not a quick, easy process, right? It requires ongoing coordination, engagement with partners and community members, logistical management, data collection, and so on and so forth. And so a repeated challenge identified by communities that don't have a dedicated position to support this is that staff often end up carrying this work off the side of their desks, which leads to strain and slower progress. And, you know, it's a lot, and a lot of people don't have a lot of capacity to do that within their current roles. And so because of this, we strongly recommend having a dedicated coordinator, because it also really creates a single point of leadership to move the work forward. So that person's focused on keeping that implementation moving. And they basically act as a liaison between municipal departments, community partners, and external supports. And it also really helps to ensure alignment, accountability, and consistent momentum throughout the implementation process to keep it going. Next slide. Thanks, Sawaishi. So based on this then, not surprisingly, for the implementation of Dauphin's CSWB plan, we're recommending the creation of a dedicated CSWB coordinator. Now, this could either be a full or part-time position depending on capacity, but the key is that the role is embedded within the municipality, so it has the authority, stability, and access to the internal systems that support implementation. And so, as I mentioned, basically this position provides that backbone backbone support needed to keep the work moving. So things like coordinating partners, tracking the progress of the plan implementation, managing data, and ensuring accountability. And we're also recommending a constellation governance model structure to structure the work across the plan's priority areas. And I'll show you a diagram of that on the next slide just to help explain it a little bit more. But just before I do, essentially, this model creates flexible, interconnected constellations, hence the name, or action tables. So there's an action table for each priority area outlined in your CSWB plan. That are comprised of different community partners, depending on the areas or sectors most relevant to them. And basically what this model does is it ensures that work is coordinated across the community rather than siloed or dependent on one organization. So instead of the implementation of the plan falling on just the municipality or just a community organization, it brings partners together at these different tables and really, like I said, avoids siloing or relying on one group to essentially figure everything out on their own. And so then within this structure, it's those action teams that I said, one per priority area, that will drive those actual implementation processes. So the actions under each of those priorities will be done by those respective action teams. And then the coordinator will provide the overall backbone support. So kind of working with everybody, communication, things like that, but they're not doing the job alone. And so basically what their job entails is working alongside community members, organizations, and action teams to ensure that people have what they need to contribute effectively to the plan implementation. And so I just want to reiterate that even if this role is housed within the municipality, this is still the community's plan and the community's implementation process, but with coordination support from the municipality. And so basically this partnership-based approach ensures the plan reflects community priorities, leverages existing strengths, and keeps the work grounded in lived experience while also demonstrating commitment from the municipality to support it. Because ultimately the implementation is strongest when leadership and community move together collaboratively in the process. All right, so now I'll show you the diagram. Okay, so again, this is an image of the constellation model, which is essentially a collaborative governance approach for networks of organizations working on complex social issues like CSWB plans and the priorities within them. So this is a very common framework for CSWB plan implementation in Canada. And so basically, as I mentioned, instead of creating a new like centralized organization, what this entails is partners work together through flexible, self-organizing action teams, also known as constellations. So you can see the action teams at the top, which, as I said, there'll be one action team per priority area. So the key features of this model is that partners are brought together around a shared purpose and common goal, which is your CSWB plan. So everybody's working towards that common goal of implementing the CSWB plan. And then those action teams are formed around the priority areas and lead the implementation of the respective actions related to each of those priority areas. And then the membership of those teams would include people with in-depth knowledge in that priority area who are equipped and well-versed in what needs to be done and how implementation would look. And then you'll also see at the bottom, so there's a steering or advisory committee, which is basically a central body, so multi-sectoral table that provides guidance and ensures alignment throughout the process. And so this is very much like the advisory committee that oversaw the development of your CSWB plan. And it could even be the same group that acts as the advisory committee for the implementation or some extension of it, plus or minus a few folks. And then finally, that circle there on the left that says backbone support, that would be the CSWB coordinator who provides that neutral support, logistics, and facilitation between the steering committee, across the action teams, and then the community in general. So they just kind of help keep the communication going, schedule the meetings, and keep it flowing. And so basically, the nice thing about this model is that it's highly reflexive or highly flexible and responsive. It's very supportive of collaboration because, again, it brings groups together across the community. It supports shared leadership, it minimizes bureaucracy, and it keeps collaboration action-oriented and community-driven. And that's why this is the model that we're recommending for your CSWB plan. All right, and then just briefly, so we also just want to flag that part of this process, in addition to implementation, is monitoring and evaluation. And so we're sharing this slide because it really just helps us conceptualize how change happens through the CSWB plan. So often when we think about the impacts of these CSWB plans, we kind of focus on these long-term outcomes. So things like reducing crime, increasing safety, improving well-being. And of course, those are important. Those are viable goals, and that's what we want to achieve through these. But it's also important to think about short and medium-term impacts, some of which Dauphin has already realized or begun to realize by participating in this process. So, for example, one short-term outcome is enhanced multi-sectoral collaboration, which has been a consistent part of this process going forward through your advisory committee and the partnerships that have been developed with the data collection and so on and so forth. And another example of a short-term outcome is that our data collection process has improved the understanding of risk and protective factors in Dauphin. And so even that information in and of itself is a great thing to have because it allows you to inform actions moving forward. So this is just something to consider when we think about changes as a result of the CSWB plan. We don't need to jump straight to long-term impacts. Obviously, those are the ultimate goal, but in the meantime, we can share sort of these shorter-term and medium-term impacts. We can use those to tell ourselves not only is it working, but also share that with the community and show the shorter-term successes and the quicker wins that are occurring throughout this process as we go. And so in your CSWB plan, you'll see we've included a list of indicators related to each one of your priority areas that allow you to track the progress of the implementation of your plan over time, some long-term, some short-term. And this is largely will be the work of your CSWB coordinator, but our team will also provide support throughout this process because we're staying on for another year to support implementation. So we will help with that as well. And with that, last slide. So in terms of what happens next, basically the version of the CSWB plan we sent you folks is a Word document. We're just finalizing that one. And then we have a design version that will be shared with you for the public facing document that can be shared with the Dauphin community. And then, as I mentioned, our team will be sticking around for another year to support with implementation. So we'll work with your coordinator and your project team to identify next steps, build those action tables, and also discuss the use of the one-time provincial seed funding of $60,000 that Manitoba Justice is providing to each of the communities. So we'll help with that, and then also help with resource development plan to help make sure that these efforts are sustained going forward. So yeah. And with that, Oishi, I think that's the end of our presentation, and happy to take questions if any of you have questions for us.
Thanks very much for that. There's lots of information. Any members of council have questions or comments? Councillor Bellamary, start us off.
Okay, so my first question is, in talking about the funding, the coordinator position, so obviously we have to talk about funding. And certainly the idea of this whole plan is that it's a community plan, it's not a municipal plan. What models have you seen for paying the salary of the coordinator? Do you have access to that information?
So there's different approaches. In some cases, we've seen municipalities completely fund it. For example, like here in Ontario, this was legislated by the government and there was no funding attached to it whatsoever. So all of the municipalities basically just had to fund it themselves. In a couple of the other communities in Manitoba we've worked with, they've also said that they would fund it through their municipality. We've also had some say that they're going to utilize that seed funding I mentioned to start it up. Just noting though that seed funding does require a resource development plan, so or a sustainability plan, recognizing that it's only one-time funding. So it really just depends on the community, but typically We encourage, if possible, the municipality to try and fund that. But that being said, our team is also here, like I said, Councillor Bellemare, for a year. So we can help with resource development and exploring different funding options for those positions as well to see if there's different ways that that can be resourced in the longer term.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor, who's next? Sobring.
Hi. Just one question. I got the plan here and I was kind of going through it all. Is there a kind of a ranking of what would be the top priorities versus the lower priorities? Like some of the stuff in here is pretty from creating a advocacy for a minimum universal basic income, which is a pretty big shot.
Yeah.
And then you have stuff that is like just making sure our parks and playgrounds have accessibility. Is there a ranking as far as what would be the most, the best use? So if we have $60,000 and you could do 1 or 3 of these projects, what would be the recommendation as the most effective?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, in terms of prioritization, I would say typically you want to kind of start with those quick wins that you can do relatively easier and implement relatively quickly. To your point, Councillor Sobering, there are some in there that are more advocacy based, and that's recognizing that those are, like you said, more like a long shot. They'll take a lot longer to implement and things like that. So typically what we recommend is, obviously all of it's important, but you want to kind of identify, just like Awashi mentioned earlier, some of those quick wins and things that you can get off the ground quickly, and then kind of look more long term at what might need some further discussion and effort. And also I saw Cassandra turn her camera on, so I don't know if you want to add to that, Cassandra. Okay.
Maybe before we take the next question, I just want to also thank Cassandra Dauphin and Trevor McNeely from Manitoba Justice for also joining us on the presentation.
Other questions? Councillor Ray, you were also involved in the committee. Do you have anything to add, or I don't want to put you on the spot or anything, but okay. Any other questions or comments? I just have sort of one generic one that's sort of related to information. Of the 100 and so actions that were listed, the majority of them, almost all of them, are TBD, to be determined. Yet when I looked at that list and knowing a lot of the actions of various subgroups and organizations that are involved in our community, I'm thinking a lot of them are ongoing. And so I'm just wondering who created that list or who designated those ongoing and those TBD, because I guess I don't want to say I'd argue, but I would say that there's a lot more stuff that's ongoing in our community now that is in place. So somebody want to respond to that or give me a...
Yeah, I can. So right now, the way that we kind of identified whether it's TBD or ongoing is specifically if the actions have listed that like continue exploring or continue to do this specific thing. That being said, that might be something that we could look at with like maybe Lisa, just to really like go through the list and see if we can change that language a bit. If things are ongoing, it's typically something we work with the advisory committee with to ensure that the actions that we have are things that like to kind of note what's already being done in the community. So if it sounds like certain things are still ongoing and they're not, and they're listed as TBD, we could definitely do like another refined look at the list and kind of change that language. And that typically does, I think, kind of elicit a little bit more confidence from community members reading the plan too. So it works to our benefit.
Councillor Sobering?
Yeah, just maybe one more crack at it. Because this program has been run right across Canada, or Ontario and Manitoba, what are some of the most significant, I guess, wins or positive impacts? Like which types of projects have definitely made an improvement to the communities that have implemented them? Or what areas are what are the projects that are really making a positive impact in communities based on what the ones who are doing this already?
I mean, I think so. In terms of, are you asking in terms of like the ones that are noticeable kind of right away? I just want to make sure I understand the question, because like,
no, not necessarily fastest, but just what are the most meaningful initiatives so far in your experience? I mean, this has been ongoing and they've mandated in Ontario and this is being done elsewhere, what are the things that are working, I guess, or the ones that that just stand out as like, that was a very great, this was a great initiative. This made a real impact in our community for the better. Do any jump out at you based on the people that are using these plans already?
I would say a couple things that I can think of off the top of my head, and like we're happy to, get additional feedback around really specific programs and things like that. One of the big things we're seeing, and I touched on it a little bit, but is definitely the increase in cross-sector collaboration. I think one of the things we hear a lot from this process is that organizations are working in silos, and the amount of times that we hear people saying we need this in the community, and then service providers say we already have that. So I think one of the big things is the cross-sector collaboration, but then also informing people of what's available in the community already. So it's not even like a new initiative, it's just increasing awareness of what resources are available and how to access them. That's something that I think we hear consistently across the board, and I'm sure my colleagues would probably agree with me on that. So I would say that. So increasing collaboration, which I think service providers, we get a lot of positive feedback from them, just saying like, you've brought us together in a room, we're having conversations about stuff we're doing, and that in and of itself is helpful. Increasing awareness, like I said, of what's already happening in the community, and then connecting people to the services they're looking for, I think is huge. And I'm trying to think, there was something else that was on the top of my mind. And then just, like I said, some of those quick wins. So things like the SEPDED pieces and stuff that people can see, like cleaning up parks, if there's things like that where people talk about like the physical environment. I find that those tend to have impacts because they're quickly able to be done, and people see the outcome relatively like right away, essentially. And so those can be shared with the community, and they create a sense of, oh, stuff is happening with these plans. And I think that in and of itself is like a positive outcome of these as well. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything.
If I can just add, like in terms of identifying what exists, that's certainly occurring through this planning process in every community. And I would say like identifying the things that don't exist and the opportunities to commit resources to those things, which is really what this is about. Like, let's find the things that maybe could address some of these issues in a different way. I'd say that certainly came out. And if we're looking for a local Manitoba example of some success in terms of at least initial success, Thompson has their CSWB plan. And, I know the Sobering Center and some of that work that came out of that collaborative work related to that planning process, I'd say was this early success up there.
Yeah, thanks. And it wasn't, my question wasn't like a trap or a gotcha or aha. I just always like to pragmatically, who's doing the thing that seems to be the best thing, and let's start there. It's not so. Thanks your input. Appreciate it.
There's one thing I'd just like to ask at the end. I was hoping that I would find it in the report, and I didn't see it there, and I don't know if I missed it but one of the observations that I've made prior to and during this whole process was, and I've used this term, and I'll use air quotes, we need a boss of our committee, and a boss that, and meaning a jurisdictional body that has authority. In the sense of getting the various partners around the room, around the table that we have to actually act. And I don't see that in here. And I know that it's really hard to, because I think that part of the fear I have in the future is if it's a municipal plan, that the municipality will lead. And certainly we want to lead on all of the things that are listed here. But the challenge is we can't make these other organizations or partners do the things that are obviously necessary because it's not our jurisdiction. We don't own it, or it's this agency or this organization's responsibility. That's sort of layered on a challenge that I've seen in our community in the past, and I think it exists in other communities, of the various organizations in this fight with us are all fighting for dollars, sometimes with each other, and sometimes applying for funding for certain supports or certain programs that another agency is also trying to get, which then oftentimes when these organizations have funding, there's guidelines on what they can spend that funding on. And so what I was sort of the question in all of this, or an ask for you to give me some going forward steps, is how might this work if we were able to fund a coordinator position, yet that position doesn't have the authority to formally get any of those other partners to do any of the actions that we may have collectively identified, which is, it gets into this quagmire of the jurisdictional, who's responsible. So it was mentioned in the presentation a couple of times, the whole silo kind of thing. I think we're trying to break that down by bringing people together, yet some of the things I think I just mentioned are some of the challenges I see as we go forward, where, the report outlines a lot of the things that we've been talking about and puts them into 5 very, I think, strategic areas of effort. Yet I think we have a challenge of getting any of those agencies or organizations to actually say, yeah, okay, we'll do that, or we can do that. And that's the part I'm wondering, like, are there examples out there, as Councillor Sobering asked about other best practices? Is there a best practice out there where you've seen something like this work, or how do we get our partners to do what we think they can do to help us with this?
Yeah, that's a really fair question. A couple things I would note. So the first one, I think the big part of this is, so even with your advisory committee, it's really letting the different sectors and the partners understand what is the benefit to them and their sector of the involvement in this work. So really getting their buy-in and kind of sharing. And the one thing I will say is, if that advisory committee that is going to be involved in the implementation is largely the same group that was involved in the development, that's huge, because those folks have been there since day one. They have helped us develop that plan. They're invested in this. They see the importance of this and why this is valuable to the community and to their respective organizations and sectors. So I think if we can continue with that group, I think that's huge. And from my understanding, that tends to be the case, or a good section of those folks tend to move forward. So I think one key piece of that is, it's not necessarily the coordinator is dictating what they need to do. It's a collaborative process. So they're doing that coordination, but really it's ensuring that these groups have the buy-in. They understand the benefits to themselves, to their organizations, to the broader community. And then the other piece I would add to your point about resourcing is, absolutely. We're not expecting them to just dish out money here and there. Part of it is aligning existing efforts with the actions, so we can see where there's overlap in what they're already doing and how those can align with the actions in the plan. And then the other piece is, this is where our team comes in with that implementation support in identifying, a resource development plan. So if we figure out pieces of the implementation that require further funding, that's where we can say, okay, let's explore from here where we can get additional dollars, so that we're not seeing, the different groups competing or ending up using money that they need for something else. And I will also just note, Trevor has already compiled a pretty hefty list, I believe, of various funding options in Manitoba, and I believe federal too as well, right, Trevor, that we can use as a resource going forward. I don't know if anybody wants to add to that.
Yeah, I can just add, I'm always thinking locally, provincially, what's happening. And in terms of collaboration, we have a lot of examples of effective and successful collaboration, and that work's done through relationships and trust, and that commitment to come to that table. And I think, to Katie's point, this advisory committee's been a part of informing that plan and the priority areas that are in that plan. So that would suggest that those sectors are committed and want to see this move forward. And just provincially, what I can say is that we're early in the new year now. We're moving ahead with a provincial advisory committee for community safety and well-being planning that'll look at some of those themes that are coming out of all of the communities. So currently we're about to have 7 plans complete in this first go, and then we'll start with the next 5. So that provincial committee, I think, in terms of addressing some of those jurisdictional issues or maybe some of those opportunities for resources, can just look at some of those themes across communities.
Thanks very much. Any other members of council have any questions or for these folks? So on behalf of council, I want to thank you for your support, and we'll look forward to your ongoing support as we go forward with this. Thank the provincial folks. I know you guys you don't sign the checks or anything, but if there's any other resources or funding available, and Trevor, I'm sure we'll be knocking on your door or trying to get that list as quick as we can to see what other possibilities are. And I know council, we've been waiting for this for a long time. So I think that, once we have further discussions on it, we'll figure out, what our next steps will be, and we'll be communicating that back to you directly, probably through Lisa and Charlotte and other members of the committee. So without any further ado, again, thank you very much for making the presentation today. We've got the resolution that will be up next that we'll be passing. And again, thanks very much. I know it's supper time where you are, and or a couple of you are. So again, thanks very much.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate
Take care.
it. Have a great
care.
evening.
All right then, folks, we'll move on. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Daly. Whereas the City of Dauphin is committed to fostering a safe, inclusive, and resilient community where residents feel a sense of belonging and have access to the supports and services necessary to thrive. And whereas community safety and well-being planning is a collaborative, evidence-based approach that addresses the social determinants of safety and well-being through prevention, social development, risk intervention, and coordinated response. And whereas the province supported the development of community safety and well-being plans throughout Manitoba, and which the City of Dauphin was a participating community, and whereas the city, in partnership with a consultant, the Canadian Centre for Safer Communities, and many other local organizations, undertook an extensive community engagement and data-driven process to inform the development of the Dauphin Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan. And whereas the development of the plan included input from residents, providers, Indigenous partners, community organizations, frontline workers, and people who lived and are living and having living experience. And whereas the Dauphin Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan identifies 5 key priority areas, being housing and houselessness, mental health and addiction, crime and safety, access to services and supports, and sense of belonging, and outlines goals and actions to address these priorities in a coordinated and collaborative manner. And whereas the Dauphin Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan is intended to be a living document that will guide collective action, inform decision-making, and support ongoing collaboration among the city, community partners, and other levels of government, be it resolved that Council adopts the plan dated December 2025, and further be resolved that Council supports the implementation of the Dauphin Community Safety and Wellbeing Plan through collaboration with community partners and encourages its use as a guiding framework for municipal planning, advocacy, and decision-making related to community safety and well-being. Any comments regarding the resolution? Seeing none, call for the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Thanks, Lisa, Charla, Kathy, Ted. That's all. But folks that were on the committee that spent all those hours working on that, thanks very much. Moved by Deputy Mayor Laughlin and seconded by Councillor Stakilo, whereas in 2025, the city served as a host community for Manitoba wildfire evacuees, providing temporary shelter and support to approximately 450 evacuees from 10 communities. And whereas the Dauphin evacuation response was coordinated at the Rotary Arena with operational support from partners including West Region Treaty 2 and 4 Health, Manitoba Harm Reduction in Addictions, Prairie Mountain Health, and the Manitoba Métis Federation, with facilities and staffing support provided by the city and Dauphin Rec Services. And whereas in accordance with the city's municipal emergency plan and the requirements of the Manitoba Emergency Management Organization Administration has completed a local authority after action review to evaluate preparedness, response, mitigation, and recovery activities related to the 2025 wildfire evacuee event, Be it resolved that council accepts as information a memo dated December 16th from the safety manager recommending approval of the completed local authority after action review with respect to Dauphin's response to the evacuees and the wildfire situation. Further be resolved, the council agrees with the safety manager's recommendations and authorizes the local authority after action review to be signed and sealed by the city manager on our behalf. And further be resolved, the council authorizes administration to submit the approved after action review to a Manitoba EMO in accordance with provincial requirements. Questions or comments regarding this? Again, I just want to thank everyone that was involved in it. I know that a lot of boots and feet were on the ground, and a lot of people were running around doing a lot of things that may or may not have been in their scope of practice, but we're doing all that was necessary at that time. So again, thanks to everyone that did that, and that motion is carried. Moved by Councillor Sobring, seconded by Councillor Ray, whereas each year council reviews council appointments for committees and boards for the following term or the next term, be resolved that council approves the 2026 committee council council committees and board appointees as outlined in Schedule A. And I know that going over that list, we looked at a couple of different things, and that there's a few, I don't think there aren't any changes really, are there? Not right now. So I know we still have DRS, or the rec services, is one that we question because we haven't established that committee yet, but we just have this recommendation. And I know at the last council meeting, we were arm wrestling and, poking each other in the eye about take this committee or take that, but we agreed that we just suck it up for one more year, right? So we'll call for the question, and all those in favor? Anyone opposed? Non-indicating means you're kind of on the fence, and yeah, but it's okay. Thanks for that. Is there a name change there, Councillor Bellemare?
Well, it says Communities in Bloom, and it's the City Beautification Committee.
Okay, that's noted. Yeah, okay. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Sticalo, whereas each year council reviews the citizen appointments for external committees and boards for the following year. Be resolved that council approves the 2026 city appointments as outlined in Schedule B. Any questions or comments regarding the citizen appointees?
With the citizen appointees, I'll note that there's a few blanks yet to be determined. And so we can chat about how we can recruit, or if we know anybody interested, and we'll be passing another resolution probably in the coming month or so to make sure that all of those spots are filled.
Okay. Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Carry. All right. Moved by Deputy Mayor Loughlin and seconded by Councillor Sticalo, be resolved that we accept the council reports for today's meeting. And since Councillor Sobring left the room, let's call on him first. Okay, make it obvious. Now, let's not. We'll go to the other side of the room. Councillor Daly, can you lead us off?
I could, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have, since the last meeting, attended one meeting. December 19th, the vet board meeting here. We had finalized discussions on budget and policy updates, and have a lot of work to do in 2026, but we're good to go. And that's all I have.
It's so nice to get a brief report from Councillor Daly, isn't it, everyone? I'm just kidding. Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Mayor. December 8th was our last regular council meeting. I also earlier that day attended the Community Advisory Board meeting at the MMF Hall. December 10th, I attended the Rec Committee meeting, and later that morning joined the CSWB project teams meeting. And later that afternoon, CCFSC presented the CSWB plan to our council. December 12th, we had our DART meeting at DFC. The 16th, we had an active transport meeting here at City Hall. December 17th, Councillor Bellemare and I went on a tour of our lagoon facilities, which was actually quite interesting. And we had a CSWB project team meeting this morning as well. Just a couple community events I wanted to mention. On the 20th of December, I took in the Jake Vadeland show at the WAC, which was, I think, the best show I've seen there. And on the 25th, my wife and I helped serve Christmas supper at the Safe Warm Space. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, busy Councillor Ray. Councillor Bellemere.
Okay, thank you. So on the 10th, I had 2 meetings, Riverside Cemetery and Protective Services meeting. And further to what Councillor Ray said about the tour of the lagoon, it was really quite fascinating because the actual space itself that's going to be used is much smaller, and yet the capacity is bigger because we're using a different system. So yeah, the guys there did a really good job with the tour. And since we're talking about the new year, I just want to remind people that this is because we have a large listening audience, and this goes into the written news, that remember to think about volunteering, because this is the time of the year that we think, what are we going to do in 2026? So there's lots of things in our community that you can do that will make a difference. So I encourage people to do that. And just also thanking all the people who put up beautiful Christmas lights. That was really nice, including people with their balconies and store owners and so forth. And I thought our snow plow operators were awesome, like all that snow day after day. And I'm talking to friends in other cities and they're not even moving in their cities. And I'm going, wow, I don't know, I always feel smug about living in Dauphin because our snow plow operators do such a great job. So thank you to them. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Councillor Sticalo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For myself, quite short, just like Councillor Daly set a regular council meeting back in December. And then, yeah, that's about it for meetings for me. I too just want to comment on the great level of service from our Public Works Department on the snow removal. I mean, it's just been days and days and days of snow, and it's definitely appreciated that we're able to move around our city with relative ease. I have did a little bit of traveling, and it's not the same in the places that I've been over the holiday season. So yeah, just looking forward to 2026 and hit the ground running. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Deputy Mayor Laughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll echo Councillor Daly and Councillor Sticalo. Pretty quiet time. Obviously, I was at that regular council meeting on December the 8th, but nothing since then. But I'm looking forward to the many meetings ahead throughout the new year. So thanks very much. That's my report.
Councillor Sobering.
Looking forward to all those meetings. Yeah, I attended the council meeting in December. I went to an active transportation meeting here where we dialed in some of the technical aspects of which way the water has to go if we do this or do that. Very positive, lots of smart people around that table, and progress being made. The other meetings I attended, cemetery with Councillor Bellemere, and we had a active transportation meeting, which was also a very productive one. It's one of my passions, and there's some progress being made with the connector to the college, and there's a plan for moving forward. So all good stuff. Looking forward to it in 2026. That is my report.
Thank you. And we'll move to our student representative. Danica, do you have something for us? Have you had more meetings than Councillor Daly?
Okay. Since last meeting on December 8th, the DRCSS participated in the food drive and encouraged students to participate by making it a competition between grades. The last week before winter break, students had fun participating in Spirit Week and our school assembly full of fun games. Classes now resume today, January 5th.
And did you pay attention in today's classes? Because I know that first week after school, it's just hard to pay attention, right? You can talk to Councillor Ray about that. Did you ever rate Councillor Ray as a teacher? No? Councillor Bellemere as a teacher? No. Yeah, didn't you say you taught all the kids in Dauphin? No. Oh. Yeah. Thanks very much for those reports. I know I was out of the mix on most of the things for the last couple months, but I'm back, and soon to be back on a bike. A couple more weeks. But the snow in town, again, kudos to those folks that are trying to get it off the streets. And it's been snowing every day. And I know I've been communicating at length with the volunteers up at Northgate because they've been busting their hump trying to continue to groom the trails. And they've been out literally every day for the last 3 weeks. And it's so funny to hear the reports from some of the guys after they finish at night and go, it's going to be great tomorrow because it's going to set up. And then they get 3 or 5 centimeters more of snow on top of it. And it's just a rinse, repeat, and rinse, repeat. And but we've got 3 snow dogs going up there. And so we're really looking forward to a lot of activity up at Northgate and in town this coming the rest of the winter season. So I hope as well, just I'll wrap with the snow stuff, is that there's an advantage, right, to have lots of snow in December but not paying for it in January, or is that a disadvantage? Like just in terms of lots of snow is bad
for budget, is what you're
for
thinking
budget,
of. Yeah, I think that I'd have to defer to our director of finance to see if he likes when we got the snow or not, and if that was actually what part of his plan or not.
Right. Thanks very much for that. Call for the question then. Accept the reports. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried.